Addiction never affects just the addict. It affects all of us. Recovering from addiction and alcoholism is also a life-changing battle for families dealing with a loved one's addiction. Numerous programs support addicts as they reclaim their lives, while their families face their own challenges without the same guidance. You're listening to Voices in Courage with KL Wells, where we transform the lives of the families and loved ones of addicts and alcoholics from surviving to thriving in the midst of chaos. Tune in as we highlight vulnerable stories of families who have addicted relatives and friends and learn how they have dealt with the challenges of isolation, desperation, and shame. If you are seeking ways to live your best life, then we welcome you into this safe space. Be a part of change today with your host, KL Wells.
So we are so blessed to be guested with today Marci Hopkins, who is an incredible light in the world, who has her own story on multiple levels. She's written an amazing book called Chaos to Clarity, which I just love the title to begin with. So I want to say thank you for writing that book. And is the renowned TV personality and host for Wake Up with Marci, which I love that title too, because it has to do with a talk show with the heart. And at the center of all of our swirling around this disease, your journey, my journey, the heart really is at the center of all this. And how do we navigate when we love someone who's dealing with the throes of addiction? How do we love ourselves in the midst of the chaos of addiction? And so you have great expertise in this arena. You are sought after by all the major TV stations. And so welcome. My audience is thrilled to have you and can't wait to get started.
Thank you so much for having me. It's such a blessing to be able to come on and share our stories and try to help others to know that they are not alone and to give some wisdom that will hopefully help them during this lifelong journey.
So if you would kind of start with the origins of your story and then we'll just take it from there.
Yeah, so, I mean, it started when I was very, very young. My mother had me when she literally just turned 19. And so she was a child in the 60s, having a little girl, and I wasn't an accident. So my family rallied together to try to do what they needed to do to raise this new baby in the family. So my mother, she had her boyfriends and, she did try to marry, be with my father for a year. That didn't work. All the while, there was a lot of drinking and drugs going on during that time. I was sent between my grandparents' house and my mother's house for most of my younger years. But at 6 years old, my mother had a boyfriend and he ended up beating me. And because I got into some mischief, which I share in detail in my book, Chaos to Clarity. So once that abuse happened, I was given a choice because my grandparents found out about it. I was given a choice to live with my grandparents or my mother. An extremely difficult decision at 6 years old, but I chose to live with my grandparents because of the fear and unease that I felt living with my mother. And I remember telling my mother that I was going to stay with my grandparents and just, I guess, wishing that she would beg me to stay with her and not, as that young child, feel that she was choosing a man over me. Right. And that was the majority of my younger years. So I lived with my grandparents from 6 to 12. And I am thankful that I was there during that time, these very formative years, because I did, go to church, learn morals. I was very involved in the school and extracurricular activities. At 12 years old, my mother ended up getting married. And this is kind of fast forward. There was a lot in between there, but she got married when I was 12. And they had the wedding at my grandparents' house. Now, that was the first time I drank. I was 12 years old and I got buzzed on champagne, so excited about everything that was going on, this new life that I thought I was going to have, got to be with my mother. And the one thing that happened is that I didn't get in trouble. My mother drank all the time around me. She would actually give me alcohol at times where I didn't feel well. My stomach was hurting. I remember 8 years old, she would say, here, have a sip of my margarita. It helps me go to the bathroom. So it's like there was always the drugs or the alcohol was an answer, a solution to any problem. And these are things we learn, right? As a young person, if our parents do have a drug or alcohol problem, they are putting it off onto us. And we begin to see that as a way of life, a way of coping, an answer, a solution. So once my mother got married, I thought that I was now going to have this incredible life, a life that I always wanted, my mom back in my life, this incredible man. But what happened is my stepfather began to sexually abuse me, touching me inappropriately. And at that time, I think I was in 7th grade, and everything shifted for me in that moment. He had taken me to a movie. It was the first time he tried to touch me. And I now had a secret. Please don't tell your mother, sent me on this trip that I'd been wanting to go through with school. So now he was giving me gifts. He groomed me. I realize now, groomed me because he saw the vulnerability in me and my need of love. And he gave that to me until it wasn't appropriate. And then the gifts started. And then I really believed that it wouldn't happen again, but it was. It was happening again and again. And things were happening in my sleep. I couldn't prove it at the time, but my intuition knew. I just knew in my gut it was happening until I woke up with his hands in between my legs. And that's where I saw that I was not crazy and that it was happening, right? Mm-hmm. So, but during all of this time that this was happening, 7th, 8th grade, I was failing out of school. I was drinking on the weekends, at times. I became a bit promiscuous, meaning I wasn't having sex or anything, but I really did start to believe that if I gave myself in some sort of sexual way, then that's how I would get love back. That's how a boy would like me, right?
Yeah.
And so all of these things started shifting for me. And the most unfortunate part of this is that once I told my mother, she didn't leave him. And this happened several times. And I honestly wanted to die because here I am in this situation where I don't feel safe. My mother's not protecting me. A very, very hard place to be as a teen.
Did you think about telling your grandparents?
At that time, I didn't. I kept it to myself. I told like a very close friend of mine, mm-hmm. and we had a pact. We were actually going to commit suicide together. I mean, how sad is that, right? It's in 8th grade. I remember this young girl that started coming over and she was saying that she had abuse in her house, and I was begging for her to move in with me. That was a way I thought that I could be protected, right? That this wouldn't happen to me anymore. And I elaborate a lot more in my story, in my book. And, once I got into high school, I was still with my mother and my stepfather. It was interesting though. I think it was like the end of 9th going into 10th grade. We had moved again and he wasn't touching me anymore. I believe that maybe I got too old. That's the only thing I can think of, unless things were happening and I didn't know. But what happened is I was always in a relationship. And so what I would do is I would leave the house all the time. I honestly I don't remember parts of my high school years in the house with my mother and stepfather. Maybe there are things that were happening and I just have pushed them down. But all the while, alcohol is what I was doing to cope. The weekends drinking. I didn't drink during the week, but it was my escape. It was my way of feeling powerful, honestly. And then my drinking, after I left high school, I drank every day because what I saw was drinking every day. That was very normal. I didn't think anything different, right? I wasn't drinking a bottle of wine a day. I wasn't drinking in the mornings. I wasn't drinking in the afternoon. I actually had a very, what people would think is a pretty solid life, right? I got through college. I had a great job. I was rising the ranks. But all that time, I truly I built so many walls around myself. And my mother was also, she was an alcoholic. And all this time she was drinking, she's partying. I just wanted to get away from it. I'd gotten to a place where when I was younger, I'll never forget this one scene. It was after high school and I was trying to make my way through college. And I went through a lot of colleges until I finally found one that worked for me. And I had all these people around me that were doing drugs. I was going to clubs and I saw myself in the reflection of a huge window and I saw my mother.
Oh, wow.
I did. And I knew in that moment I had to make a change.
Wow.
Because my fear of my whole life, even into my 40s when I was drinking, was becoming my mother. It was so terrifying. And again, I would go through ebbs and flows where my drinking would escalate. If things started going difficult in my life, I would drink more. I was always changing people, places, and things. If things started getting bad for me, thinking that it would make it better. And, so it was hard for me to connect with people. I moved a lot through my life. I never thought that people really could love me. I didn't know what that looked like, really. I didn't know what real love looked like.
Sure.
And I didn't know how to give it. I knew I wanted it. I knew I wanted a really solid relationship. But that was hard. It was hard because I would always get into relationships. Things would happen. I'd get unhappy. My drinking would escalate. And then I would actually step outside of the relationship, find someone else so I could bridge the gap from that person to the next person. So that person wouldn't hurt me. It was always, I will hurt you before you hurt me. So ultimately what happened was I had a great job. I was living in LA. I'm from Houston, Texas. I moved to Denver with my work, then to LA. I ended up meeting my husband. I was director of on-air promotions for FX. I got married, had my first child, and that was the first time I felt true love for my child. That was when wow, right? And also you're thinking, how did my mother do what she did to me, right? Yeah. And at that time, my mother was now starting to go to rehabs, okay, because her drinking had gotten so bad. So I'm now trying to have this new baby, but also take care of my mother.
Oh, wow.
Which was, yeah, right.
That's okay.
Taking my infant to the rehab, right? To try to support my mother through that. So
can you give me a little bit of context here, Marci? How long ago was that?
So that was, my son is now 20. So 19 and a half years ago.
Okay.
My mother died 3 years ago. So I will tell you, the majority of my life, I dealt with her drinking. Then it got really, really bad. And then when she was on her own, it was kind of like my husband and I were trying to care for her, help her along. And then we told her I had to start protecting my family.
Right.
So I separated from her. And I always told her, if you quit drinking and all, I want you in my life.
Yeah.
But I could not have the utter chaos that she was creating. I mean, the fear I would have all the time that she was going to die in an automobile accident or whatever the case. I mean, there was constant fear my mother was going to die too. Right. So, the rehab started, but during this time, so I had my first child, trying to support her. Then now she's going through her divorce because her husband's now can't handle it anymore. I mean, it was just beyond.
It's insane.
Insane. And I had no one to lean on, right? But my mother was always leaning on me. And now I'm a new mother. I don't know, that it was beyond what I could deal with. So then we ended up moving to New Jersey. My husband had an opportunity in New Jersey. We were living in California. My mother just happened to be living in California also. So we told her, we're moving to New Jersey. If you get sober, we want you to come live with us. Okay. So we moved to New Jersey. I get pregnant again. We have our 2 children and things are good. Fitting into the community. I'm giving back to the community. I'm raising my children. I'm doing everything I can to not be my mother, to not have my children feel abandoned. But I will tell you, there was, that mommy culture. And also just for me, it was normal to drink every day. I wasn't drinking while I was pregnant, but I will tell you once I had the babies, like I started drinking again. And so at that time I was drinking every day, but it was just at night, once I started cooking dinner, have a glass with dinner. Right. And, these were several years like that. My mother on the other side, still going through rehabs, halfway houses, jail. I mean, this is what I'm dealing with. And so again, trying to keep my family stable, keep myself stable, and all the while my mother in jail, fearful of her dying, what's going to happen next? And always feeling like I wasn't doing enough for her, right?
Sure. Mm-hmm.
And I know you can relate to that. So once I hit 40, I decided to get in front of the camera. Now, I've always been in media, always in television, but on the network sides, on the side. So at 40, I'm 54 now. At 40, I decided to get in front of the camera. Some things in life started happening. Now, trying to balance raising my children, being at the beck and call of my agents, booking gigs. But I never wanted anyone else to care for my kids. I wanted to be there for them. Mm-hmm. And my drinking started elevating really badly because the fear that I had, the self-loathing, I had no self-esteem. So all of those walls that I had built up, people may have seen me as a very strong person, but on the inside, I was that little girl in fear all the time. Right.
Yeah.
And so it was something about getting in those rooms and feeling judged all the time. And it really spiked my insecurities and my self-loathing. And I started drinking more. I started using alcohol as a crutch, as my liquid courage during that time.
So, Marci, was your husband aware of the internal turmoil that you were putting yourself through?
I don't think he understood so much for a long time.
Yeah.
But we started having problems and we did go for therapy. And thank God, because he was able to understand, the therapist was able to explain to him my needs and why I was the way that I was.
Yeah.
It was almost like I needed you to love me and show me so much attention. But at the same time, I was putting, an arm's length and, like I wanted the hug, but then don't hug me. Right.
Right.
Like, it was
it's
turmoil. Yeah.
Yes. It's this schizophrenic thing.
Yeah. Yeah.
Which is crazy making for all parties concerned.
Exactly. So once the drinking started elevating again, I didn't want to be like my mom. I started waking up in the middle of the night and I was looking up all these different ways to stop, to tame my drinking. It was the idea of never drinking again was terrifying. Like I couldn't fathom not drinking. Like it was just it'd been my whole life. Right. Except for little intervals here and there. And so I was like, maybe hypnosis, maybe acupuncture, right? I was just trying to find all these different ways. And of course, all of it kept going back for me to AA. So finally, and we again were having trouble, my husband and I, and he just kept saying, I want you to get healthy, because you can't force anyone to get sober.
Right.
And if you begin to say, you're an alcoholic, you need to do something, man, you just become defensive. Even if you are thinking that about yourself, you will begin to drink at the person, right? Like it's, and I know you've been through this. So there's so much anger. So I finally had gotten to a place where I was, I would at times go to events for my kids' school. And, I couldn't go to these without having some wine before. Like things were they were spiraling. So I ultimately made the decision to go to AA. There's so much shame. I was living in so much shame, so much fear, so much guilt, so much pain. And you're so fearful when you go into the rooms, right? It's so interesting. You're so afraid of being, well, I guess you're afraid of being judged, but you're also like, how did I get here?
Right.
So I went for 3 months and it was great. I went on a vacation sober. It was my first time ever getting sober. I was starting to become curious. I was starting to like myself again. But what I started doing was comparing myself to other people in the room. I don't have these crazy stories. I'm still a part of the community. I'm still a good mom. I'm doing, X, Y, and Z. I'm not an alcoholic. And even when I would say, hi, I'm Marci, I'm an alcoholic, I still at that time didn't 100% believe it. Like, when you believe it and you're saying those words. I was more going through the action of it because that's what they have you do in the beginning, right?
Yeah.
So,
How long did it take you before you said those words out loud and you knew the truth?
a year.
Okay.
So I convinced my husband that I'm fine. I can do this. And of course, okay, great. We just happened to be going to a Halloween party that night. And what's so interesting, it was definitely a year because my last day of drinking was October 3rd. And we were going to a Halloween party the year before when I had convinced him I was okay. So I started slowly drinking, right? Went to the party, I had 1 glass of wine. Like, I can do this, right? But slowly you start bringing people into your life that are drinking more. So you never look like you're doing something out of the norm.
Sure.
But it was when I was going on my gigs or my auditions, like every day, it became, how am I going to drink at lunch? And how, my thinking was really starting to change. I was even, and I had so much shame over this, but I've forgiven myself. For years, I didn't drink and drive with my kids or myself. And I started doing that. Like, you start believing you're never going to get caught. You can do this, right? And I would have my bottle of wine in my thermos, like craziness in the end. Right?
Yeah.
And it was the final day. We don't have to go through all the gory details of that year, but by the end of it, I had gone to a gig and I ended up having my liquid courage, full stories in my book. I'm fast forwarding. And I ended up getting a DUI. And I went to bed still angry because I was always the victim. I hated my husband, my life. I mean, you could look at it and say, Marci has everything, but I felt I had nothing except for the love for my children. I mean, that was always a constant.
Yeah.
But the drinking and the slippery slope and starting to hide drinking, and it just had gotten to a really bad place. So I went to bed that night. And thankfully, I really believe that God had stepped in. Like, I needed a major consequence for me to stop. I recognize that now. And somebody called in for erratic driving. I thank God didn't hurt anyone. I didn't hurt myself. I had so much shame and guilt for that for several years. And even when I say it, I still feel so awful about it. But again, forgiveness is such a huge part of what we have to do to move on. Right.
Yeah.
And so the next day I woke up and thank the dear Lord for him stepping in and saying, Marci, it's time. It's time to surrender. And I just knew in that moment, like, I needed help. I had to stop with the lies and fighting it. And so I go downstairs and I tell my husband, sit down on the couch, and at that point, I'm sure if I had not admitted that I was an alcoholic and needed help, I would have lost everything. I would have lost my husband, the kids, the house, everything, my life.
Right.
Yeah. And I told him that I'm an alcoholic and needed help. And God, he embraced me. And it was honestly the first time that I felt true love. It was like I was finally able, the walls came crushing down. I felt like the weight of the world came off my shoulders.
Yeah.
I surrendered. I let it all go. And I went into those rooms to AA, and I tell you, I never looked back. I mean, I was 100% in, and now I'm 8.5 years sober.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
Yeah. Yeah. Are you able to kind of identify that little click that took place for you? I think, for those of us who love somebody or buddies that are dealing with substance abuse disorder, we're always told, we'll wait for them to hit the bottom. Well, sometimes that bottom is death.
It is.
And so I think that there's a curiosity to wonder, where's that turning point where you finally surrender, like you surrendered, and say, I need help. This is bigger than me.
I'm just going to say this, and I wish that I could have done something different for my mother to have that moment, right? Because she tried AA so many times. She went through an intensive rehab through jail. I mean, like, she did it all. But it is the individual. And there's nothing you can do to help someone find that moment where they're ready to surrender. And there's going to be relapses. There's so many changes that have to take place for an individual, for them to continue on a sobriety journey. The 12-step program is a true gift. And the reason I say that is because I went through so much therapy, but I was able to tear down those walls, get to the real root of my trauma through the work I did in therapy through those 12 steps. You have to find, first of all, you have to truly believe you have a problem.
Right.
And that you really want help.
Right.
You have to find a spiritual path for yourself. You have to believe that something is bigger than you and turn over the wheel of the car. You got to stop trying to be in control of everything. You have to start recognizing your part in things. It's so important, because if you are always blaming, shaming, and not forgiving others, and not recognizing your part, having empathy for the situation, right? Because we all have a side to things. And you've got to recognize that. And the only control you have of anything is how you respond.
Yes.
Your actions, right? And then to start to get out of yourself, volunteer, do things for others, live in gratitude, find the things you're grateful for every single day. When you start to live in gratitude, you start to look at life in such a different way. And what I did, what I learned, you can get like a gratitude box, a gratitude jar. You write something down, find 3 things a day. It doesn't have to be big.
Right. Yeah.
How many things do we have in our lives that we can be grateful for? And it's so important you do that.
Mm-hmm.
You know, removing the people, the places, and the things that are triggering you.
Mm-hmm.
Triggers are huge and they're real.
Yeah.
And you just have to build your toolbox. There's such a toolbox and there's so many things you can learn.
Mm-hmm.
And you might think in the beginning of AA, like,
Mm-hmm.
oh, that sounds corny, but it's real.
Mm-hmm.
It's
Mm-hmm.
real. Like, to really like move a muscle, change a thought. Right?
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
can't think of anything more than one thing at a time.
Mm-hmm.
You're sitting there, you're thinking about a drink. Get up, go do something
Mm-hmm.
else.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Remove all the alcohol from your house.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Or the
Mm-hmm.
things that trigger you in your house.
Mm-hmm.
And it's okay.
Mm-hmm.
It's okay to make these changes in your life. It's okay to be weak because you're building that strength through the people in the community that
Mm-hmm.
help you to build this new life together.
Right. Well, it's a complete redesign.
It is.
And I'm still always struck by, how you tell this story is I just didn't drink. I'm on the other side of the equation, and everything that is true for you in your sobriety is true for me as a loved one.
Right.
So
Absolutely.
I had to relearn all of the things that you're talking about for myself in order to love myself in the midst of my son's chaos.
Yeah.
Love him in the midst of his own chaos. I talked about it through the lens of learning to love deeply with no expectation of how this story ends or goes or anything along those lines. I think is one of the most courageous acts we can step into.
Yeah, it's so important. And I didn't do this for myself, and I wish I had, is you have to take care of yourself.
Yes.
If someone in your family has alcohol use disorder or drug addiction, you've got to get help for yourself.
Mm-hmm.
You've got to learn how to love yourself, like you said. Understand really what that person is going through. It's not about willpower. It's not about choice, right? There is a choice to get sober. There are choices, but an addiction is a disease. And so to understand what that really is, what that person's going through. And when you are getting sober, you are rewiring your entire brain.
Exactly. I was just going to ask you about that.
Yes. Yeah. I mean, if you think about it, everything roots back to our feel-good drug dopamine, that we get these hits in our brain, right? Oh, that drink made me feel good. Oh, that video game made me feel good, right? You get this hit, right? Feels good. And as we do it more and more, our bodies cannot handle the constant dopamine hit. So it has to, our neurotransmitters they have to start rewiring a different way so you can manage the mind, the body can manage. And so there's just so many things that happen in our bodies, right? We're filling our bodies with this toxicity, and then our bodies over time become dependent on that drug. And then there's also, what is genetic in our families. Like both my parents, alcoholics, my grandfather, my aunt, my uncle, and then far removed. I mean, like when I tell you my family riddled with addiction, riddled. And that's real. I mean, I honestly, my son doesn't drink, but I have fear for my daughter because I see her, she can go without drinking and I don't drink, but then she drinks too much. And there's that fear of, is it being too young or this is a red flag?
Right.
Right.
Yeah. And are these open conversations?
Yes. Yeah. I talked to her about it and understanding it. And, she thankfully she understands. I mean, she used to be in a lot of fear about it, but now she's like, Mom, I'm fine. I'm okay. And she, I think drinking, especially at a young age, and if we're coping with things and such, recognizing the behaviors. I never had anyone to step in and say,
yeah,
this isn't good. This behavior is not right. You're blacking out every Saturday night during the the weekends, because my mother was blacking out almost every night. So
sure,
right. Like that just
this is
became normal.
Right.
I knew I didn't want to be that.
Right.
But for me, and like then people go the opposite way. They may see their parents drinking like that, and then they decide never drink again. But it was how I had to cope with all my trauma. And that's how I chose to cope. Yeah.
Yeah. So there's two things, Marci, I'm thinking about. One is this focus on not becoming your mom. And I'm curious as to, did you actually have a vision or a picture or a notion about what the opposite looked like, other than not becoming her? Where were you headed instead of away from?
Well, just being the best mom I could be, being the best human I could be, I suppose. But I really think it came down to parenting my children. That's where it really was. Again, I did think that way when I was younger, because I wanted a life. I wanted success in my life. I wanted to be something more than just dependent on a man and just wasting my life. So through a lot of steps, I was able to do that. And so what it also showed me is that fire I had inside of myself to be something.
Right.
And now that I'm sober, God has put me on the journey of helping others.
Right.
To think that I could start a talk show to help others, to tell people's story, to share hope, and recognize that we are all faced with trauma, whether it's grief, mental health, addiction, financial, divorce. There's trauma in our lives.
Right.
Right. But how do we get through it? What are the resources available? How do we educate ourselves? What are the tools? Right. And that's what I want to give and do give on my show. Whether you're somebody next door, or you're a celebrity, or you're a thought leader, you're an author, you're a doctor, I make sure that with every guest I have, that you're going to walk away with steps, action items to be able to move forward in whatever you're faced with. And then God guided me to write my book. And through this time, my book is called Chaos to Clarity. So the chaos was my life. I created chaos even in the silence, because what happens is...
Oh, just say that again. Just say that again. I mean, that was
Truly, though, we say we don't want chaos in our lives, but if that is all we know, that is all we seek.
Exactly.
Right. And so if I had any quiet in my life or peace, I started creating chaos. Right. So that's what I knew. That's what I was comfortable with. And that is what most do. You say you don't want it, but if it's all you know, you seek it.
Yeah.
So, and then once I begin to get sober, rewire my brain, and change my thought process, my mental state. And that's also through meditation, so vital, right?
I'm with you.
In recovery, with all of this is happening, that you're getting well, allow yourself to nap, to meditate, to rest. Like anything else, your body is healing. So please give yourself that green light to do that for yourself, because I did that a lot. But then once the clarity started for me, that's where I was able to really know my path in this life. God started planting seeds for me, Seeing the signs and breaking the cycles is seeing the signs that you need help, but also seeing the signs from the other side. I have so many beautiful God and angel stories in there that are talk about mind-blowing. About mind-blowing. And then breaking generational cycles.
Yes.
I mean, this is so important because a lot of people will ask me, how did you forgive your mother for not leaving a man that was abusing you, for not being there for you, abandoning you, for all the things that she did? But I had to forgive. And the way that I forgave her was understanding what she went through, right?
Yes.
Whatever her chaos was from her parents, my grandparents, then the way that my grandparents parented, how they were parented, right? So this is just a generational trickle down. And I think it's so important that we look at, did that work? Okay, you say, well, my mother did this, and this is what I'm going to do. But did that work?
Right.
Do you have your voice? Are you happy? Did it really work for you? And is that really the best thing to do for your child? Right? Just so start thinking about these things, because you may be living in a lot of unhappiness because of the way that your parents, parented. And it's also a generational thing, right? Things change generationally. We find we learn what's the better way, right? So really taking notice. And again, this goes back to seeing your part in things, having empathy for others, having empathy for your children. I think about, we put so much on our kids. Society puts so much on our kids. The schools put so much on their kids, right? Parents are living vicariously through their kids. Like, just the stress that they go through, and you're like, oh, well, they're just a kid. Holy Toledo, they're just a kid. And we wonder why they're looking to vape, or they're looking to drink, or they're looking to experiment, to escape.
Right.
And if they have no self-esteem, because let's get to it, the root of so often why we drink or do other things is because then we feel more comfortable in a social situation. I mean, I know adults that can't even go into a social situation without drinking, right?
Yeah.
But you have to find the power within. You have to find the happiness within and the joy within. And it all starts internally. And this is what I've learned. I used to look for everything externally, a man, a job, a house, whatever it was in my life, to bring the happiness, to validate me. But I didn't know who the hell I was. And now I do. And now I know my joy. Now I know my purpose. Now I live in peace. And we all are supposed to have that. And these traumatic things that happen in our lives, I never feel sorry for myself, because I had to go through what I went through.
Yes.
To do what I do today.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. And so are you in that space where you're able to look at your life's journey and the challenges that you face and so on and so forth as gifts that led you to this moment?
100%.
Okay.
100%. And thank God I was able to get through those challenges, right?
Yeah.
We're all given challenges in this life.
Right.
But we have to look at it as, so now when something happens to me, right? I can say, what is the lesson? Like, it's not like, oh my God, I can't believe this is happening to me. Right? Poor pitiful me. Oh my God, God is so bad. Like, the people around me are so bad, right? So if people around you are bad, like, maybe make a change. Change the people that are around you. We have the power to create the change in our lives and not stay stuck. So I can say, what is the lesson? I can say when I get in a fight with somebody
Mhm.
or I'm unhappy with a situation, like, is it really that big of a deal?
Right.
What is that other person thinking? Did they perceive it in a different way?
Mhm.
Like, let's communicate. I
Mm.
didn't know how to communicate. I grew up in a house where everyone blew up and then you acted like it didn't happen and you just moved
Yes.
on,
Right.
right?
Right. Yeah.
How do you learn how to communicate? How do you learn to express your feelings?
Mhm.
So you just keep pushing down until you blow up,
Mhm.
and then it becomes utter hell. Like you just like, and that's what I did. I was so reactive.
Mhm.
And I may still react at
Mhm.
times, right?
Sure.
We're
Mhm.
human. That
Mhm.
stuff comes back. The old Marci
Mhm.
comes in, but I can
Mhm.
stop it and say, whoa, what are you doing, Marci? What are you doing? Let's talk about this.
Mhm.
You know, so there is so much that you learn. And when you give yourself the gift
Mhm.
of recognizing these things and just changing, like all that, we have such a gift of so many people now talking
Right.
about sobriety, mindset shifts, what
Mhm.
has worked, the
Mhm.
belief. And I'm telling you, manifestations, law of attraction, vibrational work, energy work,
Mhm.
it's real.
Mhm.
What you believe, what you put out is what
Mhm.
you attract.
Mhm.
Start listening to people that are famous. They'll all say it,
Mhm.
right?
Mhm.
And it's just believing in yourself. You
Mhm.
may have been told for so long that you were nothing, that
Right.
you were worth nothing. The narrative that tape that just plays over and over. And that might be a reason why you're drinking. That might be a reason why you're doing things that are hurting you.
Right.
But you got to start slowly changing these things. And the first thing is making that decision to make the change,
Mhm. Mhm.
you know?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
you got to change your daily routines. Like there's
Mhm.
just so much. And
Mhm.
you know, again, there's so many books out there. There's so many people out there that are helping.
Mhm.
Like, and you know, that's why I wrote my book. I wanted to share my
Mhm.
story of
Mhm.
trauma, the
Mhm.
journey through that, my
Mhm.
moment where I decided to get help, the journey through recovery,
Mhm.
and how I became who I am today, and the success in life today, and the happiness and the joy. That's the biggest part of it.
Mhm.
And
Mhm.
and action items, what I learned through the 12-step program. Like there's so many people out there telling their stories to try to help you. So
Mhm.
if it's something you're just even thinking about, if you are thinking about it, then
Mhm.
you have a problem,
Mhm.
and it's okay. And it's
Mhm.
okay. And you can make changes. Maybe it's just at a place where it's a bad habit for you,
Mhm.
but start changing that bad habit for yourself so it
Right.
doesn't turn into full-blown addiction.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So, how did the dance change between you and your husband once you got sober and have been on
Mhm.
this path for 8.5 years?
So it's really beautiful. Listen, we were at a bad place.
Mhm.
Okay.
Mhm.
We probably both wanted a divorce.
Mhm.
But what happened is as I was getting help, as I was evolving, as I was changing, I
Mhm.
was able to talk to Ray, my husband, about
Mhm.
it.
Mhm.
And we started evolving, changing,
Mhm.
communicating differently.
Mhm.
The other person does have to also change.
Yes.
I will never tell my husband's side of the story,
Mhm.
but I had a lot of pain from things that he did.
Mhm.
But we started changing together.
Right.
And that's what you have to do. And
Mhm.
you know, we'll get in arguments today and it'll be like, we're better than this now. This isn't
Mhm.
who we are anymore, right? Like,
Mhm. Mhm.
so it just, you put up the walls, you're always in the defense. You know, these are things, it's hard to be vulnerable,
Mhm.
but
Yeah.
there's a lot of healing in being vulnerable.
Mhm.
And we found our way through, and we've
Mhm.
come out stronger. We actually renewed our vows.
Aw.
We did a lot to try to, and are doing, to just build on a stronger foundation and a better life together. Yeah.
Wow. Well, kudos to him.
Yeah.
And you, and to be able to build this on the other side. I have the woman I mentioned earlier, Mary Beth O'Connor, who wrote From Junkie to Judge. Her husband was with her in the worst of her meth addict days. And they are still married today. And
wow.
Holy cow. I mean, what a journey. And
it is,
and so humans are remarkable.
Yeah, we really are. Truly remarkable. I mean, I think about nowadays, I think about the inside of us. Like I just envision all these things working together.
Right.
Our heads, our hearts, our guts. Like that stuff is real. And what we ingest, how it changes all of these things. It's powerful. And it's not just what we ingest, it's what we physically, like food. It's also what we ingest spiritually.
Right.
There's just, this life can be so beautiful. And I didn't think that for a long time.
Right.
But I've learned it and I'm living it. And that's what I want to give to other people.
Yes. Wow, we're coming up against the edge of our time together. And so what I want to say is this has just been so delightful, so refreshing. I love your authenticity, your genuineness, your realness in telling your story, and your willingness to tell the realness of your story, and just the whole transformation that has taken place in your life, and that shift from outside, to inside out instead of outside in. I do think that is kind of the calling of our time in so many ways.
And I just want to say one thing, that when you start telling your story, that's where the healing begins. You can't keep it inside of you. I know so many people that will share parts of their story and they'll say, I've never told anyone before. And I'll say, well, this is the start of your healing journey.
Right.
I was terrified to say my story. I was terrified of being judged. But you know what? When I started sharing and being real and healing and people saw this, if there's people that are judging me, they're very far removed from me, because I'll tell you, the majority of people are grateful for you to share your story because they heal through that. You're helping someone else. So
yes,
share,
absolutely.
share.
Oh man. Well, and statistically, 1 out of every 2 families is dealing with some sort of substance abuse disorder. So there isn't, you can look to the right or you could look to the left, and one of you is dealing with it. And if both of you aren't dealing with it right now, you will be. Yeah.
There's so much shame. And, that's what we were taught. That's that generational thing. But we can't, you will die in the shame.
Yes, right.
You heal through communicating and and seeking help through others. Definitely.
Yes. Yeah.
Find your voice.
So let our audience know how they can get a hold of you, your book, and you and your show, and how they can link up with you, because you are worthy of linking up with.
Thank you. Please, you can find me on Facebook at Wake Up with Marci. You can go on Instagram, wake_up_with_Marci. My account was stolen, so I had to go back in, and now I have to do all these underscores. And then my book is on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, Target, Walmart, Goodreads. So, please find that, and may it bring you some help. And listen, if you want to DM me, please DM me on social media, or please, you can email me at wakeupwithmarci@gmail.com, because there's so much help, and it's okay. It's okay to be broken. Let's start moving on your healing journey.
Great. Well, thank you.
Thank you.
This has been quite an extraordinary conversation. And I am so grateful that you're 8.5 years sober and
Me too.
speaking the truth. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, life is phenomenal today, and it's sobriety and my higher power.
Fantastic.
So, thank you for having me on.
Absolutely. This has been a joy.
Thank you for joining us in this episode. We hope this discussion gives you the empowerment you need during these challenging times. Remember, there is always light after darkness. For more inspiring conversations like this one, subscribe to the show at voicesencourage.com/podcast. We encourage you to share with your friends and family going through similar situations so we can continue to build a strong community of hope and possibility. Start your life-changing journey today. Join our community at voicesencourage.com.